Have you ever felt a stranger's eyes on you, judging you not for what you've done, but for who they think you are? We've all been there. But what happens when that judgment comes from a person in a position of absolute authority? What happens when a 12-year-old boy traveling alone for the first time is singled out and humiliated for the crime of looking too smart? This isn't just a story about an airport confrontation. It's a story about a father's love, a mother's resolve, and a system forced to look in the mirror. It's about what happens when a petty tyrant in a TSA uniform messes with the wrong family. The air in Baltimore, Washington International Thurgood Marshall Airport, hummed with a unique manufactured anxiety. It was a symphony of rolling luggage wheels, muffled announcements, and the clipped impersonal tones of security personnel. For 12-year-old Elias Thornton, it was the sound of adventure. He clutched the straps of his well-worn JanSport backpack. The fabric faded from years of school and weekend trips, but the weight inside felt different today. It felt like responsibility. He was flying as an unaccompanied minor, for the first time a short hop from BWI to Boston Logan to visit his aunt for 2 weeks. His parents had gone over the plan a dozen times. His mother, Dr. Anya Sharma Thornton, had drilled him on protocol with the precision of the corporate lawyer she was. His father, Dr. Damon Thornton, had handled the emotional prep enveloping him in a hug that morning that felt like a force field. "You've got this rocket man," he'd whispered, a familiar nickname that always made Elias feel a little taller. Elias clutched a worn paperback in his hand, a buffer against the world. It wasn't a comic book or a fantasy novel, but a dense tome. A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. He'd read it 3 times already, but its concepts of space-time and black holes were a comfortable place for his mind to retreat. He was a quiet kid, observant with large, thoughtful eyes that seemed to absorb everything. He was tall for his age, lanky, and a little awkward in his own skin, wearing a simple grey hoodie jeans and a pair of well-loved sneakers. The TSA line snaked forward with agonizing slowness. Elias did everything right. He slipped off his shoes, placed his laptop in a separate bin, and slid his backpack onto the conveyor belt. He watched it disappear into the dark maw of the X-ray machine. A momentary pang of separation hitting him. That bag contained his essentials, his book, his noise-cancelling headphones, a sketchbook filled with intricate drawings of nebulae and spacecraft, and a small, smooth stone from a family trip to the Grand Canyon. He walked through the metal detector without a beep. Success. A small smile touched his lips as he went to retrieve his belongings. But as his bin emerged, it was unceremoniously shunted to the side. A TSA officer, a thick-set man, with a florid face and a name tag that read Hackett, picked up his backpack and held it as if it were contaminated. "This yours, son." Officer Gene Hackett's voice was a low growl that seemed to vibrate with suspicion. "Yes, sir," Elias said, his voice barely a squeak. Hackett squeezed the bag, his knuckles white. He looked from the bag to Elias, his eyes narrowing. "What's a kid like you doing with a laptop this fancy?" It was a standard-issue school MacBook, 2 years old. "It's for schoolwork, sir," Hackett grunted, unzipping the main compartment. He pulled out the sketchbook, first flipping through the detailed drawings with a dismissive air. "What is all this? Some kind of code?" Elias's cheeks flushed with heat. "They're just drawings of space." Hackett tossed the sketchbook back into the bin with a clatter. Then his hand fell upon A Brief History of Time. He pulled it out, holding it between his thumb and forefinger. He squinted at the cover. Then his gaze, sharp and accusatory, snapped back to Elias. Stephen Hawking. Hackett's lips curled into a sneer. "You read this stuff?" "Yes, sir. I like astrophysics." The line had begun to back up. People were watching now, their faces a mixture of impatience and mild curiosity. Elias could feel their eyes on him, prickling his skin. He just wanted his bag. He wanted to be invisible again. Astrophysics. Hackett repeated the word, drawing it out, making it sound like a disease. He looked Elias up and down, taking in his hoodie, his dark skin, his thoughtful expression. And then he said the words that would ignite a firestorm. "You know we have a profile for people like you." Elias blinked. "A profile?" "Yeah." Hackett leaned in his voice, dropping to a conspiratorial, yet loud enough for everyone to hear whisper. "The ones who try to look smart, the ones who carry things they don't understand to throw us off. It's a classic diversion. What are you really carrying in here?" The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. It wasn't just about the bag anymore. It was about him. The blood drained from Elias's face. Look smart. He didn't look smart. He was smart. He loved learning. He loved the universe and its infinite, beautiful complexity. Now this man was twisting his passion into a weaponizing it to paint him as a threat. I don't understand," Elias stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs. Humiliation, hot and sharp, washed over him. He felt a dozen pairs of eyes on his back, their curiosity turning to suspicion. Was he a threat? Did he look like a terrorist? "Oh, I think you do," Hackett said, a triumphant smirk on his face. He began to systematically empty Elias's entire backpack into the bin, holding up each item for scrutiny. The headphones, a half-eaten bag of gummy worms, his lucky stone. Each item was presented as if it were evidence in a trial. "I'm going to need you to step aside, son," Hackett commanded, gesturing to a sterile, glass-walled enclosure. "We're going to have to do a more thorough search." Tears pricked at the corners of Elias's eyes, and he fought them back with every ounce of his will. He wouldn't cry. He wouldn't give this man the satisfaction. He could feel the stares, the whispers. The adventure was gone, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. He was alone, singled out, and accused of being a fake, a fraud, a danger, all because he was a black kid with a book about stars. The glass-walled enclosure felt like a fishbowl. Elias sat on a hard plastic chair, his hands clasped tightly in his lap to stop them from shaking. Outside, the river of travelers flowed on, but many slowed as they passed, their gazes lingering on the boy being detained. He was now an exhibit, the threat. Officer Hackett was taking his time enjoying the performance. He had put on a pair of blue latex gloves and was now meticulously swabbing every single item from Elias's backpack for explosive residue. He swabbed the cover of Hawking's book with particular vigor. The process was deliberately slow, each movement designed to maximize Elias's discomfort and broadcast Hackett's authority. "Find anything interesting in your little space book?" Hackett drawled without looking up. "Any secret messages from your buddies?" Elias didn't answer. He focused on a scuff mark on the floor, tracing its shape with his eyes. He thought of his dad's parting words. "You've got this, Rocket Man." He felt like a failure. He didn't have this. He was scared and furious, and most of all, deeply, profoundly ashamed. He had done something to deserve this, he thought, in a twisted moment of self-blame. Maybe he shouldn't have brought the book. Maybe he should have worn a different shirt. A supervisor, a weary-looking woman named Brenda Riley with tired eyes and a name tag that read Supervisor, had wandered over. She observed for a moment, her expression unreadable. "What's the issue, Jean?" she asked, her voice flat. "Just being thorough," Brenda Hackett replied, not missing a beat. Subject fits a certain profile, carrying unusual items for a kid his age. Claims he's reading about quantum physics. It's suspicious. Riley glanced at Elias, then at the book. A flicker of something annoyance crossed her face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "Run the swabs. If they're clean, let him go. The Boston flight boards in 40 minutes. She walked away, the brief exchange having done nothing to help, only serving to legitimize Hackett's actions in front of the public. The swabs would be clean, and everyone knew it. The point wasn't the result. It was the process. The humiliation was the goal. Elias's phone, which he'd thankfully kept in his pocket, buzzed. It was a text from his dad. Dad. Through security yet rocket man. Everything okay? Elias's fingers trembled as he typed a reply. He didn't want to worry them. He didn't want to be a burden. Elias, almost, long line. It was a lie, but what could he say? A man thinks I'm a terrorist because I like science. It sounded insane. Just as he hit send, a man's voice, calm but radiating an authority that cut through the airport's din, spoke from behind him. "Excuse me. I believe that is my son." Elias's head snapped up. Standing just outside the glass enclosure was his father, Dr. Damon Thornton. He was still in his work attire, a crisp button-down shirt and dark slacks. He hadn't gone home after dropping Elias off. He must have been watching from a distance, waiting to see his son safely through security before heading to his office at the Goddard Space Flight Center. And over his arm, he carried a navy blue jacket. Officer Hackett looked up, his face clouded with irritation. "Sir, this is a secure area. You'll need to step back." "I will not." Damon said, his voice dropping an octave. It was the voice he used when a project was behind schedule or a calculation was off, a voice that did not brook argument. "I asked you a question. That is my son, Elias Thornton. Why is he in there?" Damon's presence was a shield. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with the same thoughtful eyes as his son, though his were currently narrowed into slits of cold fury. He exuded a quiet confidence that made Hackett's blustering authority seem cheap and theatrical. "Your son was selected for a random additional screening," Sir Hackett said, puffing out his chest. "It's standard procedure." "Random?" Damon's eyebrow arched. "My son, who has no history of any trouble, who is a minor flying alone, was randomly selected. Or was it his choice of reading material that triggered your suspicion?" He gestured towards the bin, where a brief history of time lay face down. A few onlookers who had been watching the drama with Elias now stopped, their interest renewed by the arrival of the formidable father. Hackett's face began to flush a deeper shade of red. He was losing control of the situation. "So your son was acting suspiciously." He seemed nervous. He was carrying items that what Damon interrupted, stepping forward until he was right at the edge of the enclosure. Items like a sketchbook, a school laptop, a book by one of the greatest scientific minds of our time. "What about that?" "Screams threat to you." Officer Damon's voice was rising, drawing more attention. "Supervisor." Riley started walking back towards them, a concerned frown on her face. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice," Hackett warned, pointing a gloved finger at Damon. Damon ignored him completely. His eyes were locked on his son, and what he saw there, the shame, the fear, the tear-streaked path on his cheek, Elias thought he'd hidden, broke his heart, and stoked his anger into a furnace. He slowly, deliberately unfolded the jacket that was draped over his arm. He slipped it on. It was a standard government-issue windbreaker, but the emblem on the chest was anything but standard. It was the iconic circular logo, the red chevron slicing through a blue sphere with the white letters orbiting it. NASA. He then reached into his wallet and pulled out his ID, holding it up for Hackett to see. The photo was clearly him. The name Dr. Damon Thornton was printed below it, and under his name his title, Senior Propulsion Engineer, Artemis Program. A wave of murmurs rippled through the watching crowd. The context of the entire situation shifted in an instant. "My son Damon," said his voice, now dangerously quiet. "Likes astrophysics because his father builds the engines that will take us back to the moon. He reads Stephen Hawking because he wants to understand the universe we are trying to explore. He is not looking smart to fool you, Officer Hackett. He is smart. He is a child with a passion, and you have chosen to humiliate him for it in a public forum." Hackett stared at the NASA ID, his mouth slightly agape. His blustering confidence evaporated, replaced by a dawning look of horror. He had not picked a fight with some random kid. He had picked a fight with the son of a NASA rocket scientist. He had profiled the wrong family. Now Damon continued, his eyes like chips of ice. "You are going to give my son back his belongings. You are going to apologize to him. And then you and I and your supervisor are going to have a very long, very detailed conversation about the TSA's profiling protocol and your fitness to wear that uniform." The power dynamic had not just shifted. It had been inverted with the force of a rocket launch. Supervisor Brenda Riley arrived just as the full weight of the NASA jacket settled over the scene. Her brisk walk turned into a hurried shuffle as she saw the ID, heard the murmurs from the crowd, and most importantly, saw the look on Gene Hackett's face, the pallor of a man who knew he had just stepped on a landmine. Okay, let's clear the area," Riley said, her voice attempting a tone of command that felt hollow. She turned to Damon. "Sir, if you'll come with me, we can get this sorted out in a private room. We're not going anywhere until my son has his property and an apology," Damon stated, not moving an inch. His gaze was fixed on Hackett, who was now fumbling to put Elias's things back into the bin, his gloved hands suddenly clumsy. The performative slowness was gone, replaced by a frantic haste. I apologize for the inconvenience," Hackett mumbled, shoving the backpack towards Elias without making eye contact. It wasn't an apology to the boy, but a generic bureaucratic phrase directed at the floor. "Not good enough," Damon said, his voice cold. "Look at my son and apologize to him." Hackett's head snapped up, a flash of his earlier defiance returning. "I was following procedure." Gene Riley's voice was sharp, a clear warning. Hackett's jaw worked for a moment. He looked at Elias, who was now standing next to his father, partially shielded by his arm. The boy's eyes were red-rimmed, but clear, watching him with an unnerving stillness. "Sorry, kid," Hackett muttered the words, tasting like ash in his mouth. Damon let the inadequate apology hang in the air for a moment, before nodding curtly. "Elias, get your bag." Elias quickly grabbed his backpack, zipping it shut and hoisting it onto his shoulders. The weight was familiar again, comforting. His father's presence was a tangible warmth at his side. He was no longer an exhibit in a fish bowl. "Now we'll go to that room," Damon said to Riley, his tone shifting from protective father to determined adversary. The private room was small, windowless, and smelled of disinfectant. It contained a round metal table and 4 chairs. It was the kind of room designed to make people feel small and compliant. It wasn't working on Damon Thornton. As soon as the door clicked shut, Riley launched into her well-rehearsed de-escalation script. "Dr. Thornton, I want to sincerely apologize on behalf of the Transportation Security Administration for any distress this incident may have caused you and your son. Officer Hackett was, perhaps, overzealous in his duties. We have stringent protocols and sometimes in the interest of security." Damon held up a hand, cutting her off. "Miss Riley, please. Let's dispense with the script. Your officer didn't see a potential threat. He saw a black child who didn't fit into his narrow worldview of what a 12-year-old should be, and he decided to make an example of him. He accused my son of being a deceptive fraud for carrying a science book. That isn't overzealous. It's prejudice weaponized with a badge." Hackett, standing by the door like a chastened schoolboy, flinched. "That's not true. I treat everyone the same, do you?" Damon turned his full attention to him. "How many white children did you pull aside today for reading Stephen Hawking? How many times have you sneered at a kid for looking smart? Or is that a special profile you reserve for boys who look like my son?" Before Hackett could stammer out a defense, there was a knock at the door. Riley opened it to find a young woman with a determined look on her face. She was holding her phone. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice clear and steady. "My name is Maria Fuentes. I'm a paralegal. I was in the line behind the boy. I saw the entire interaction and I recorded it." A collective intake of breath sucked the air out of the room. Damon's eyes met the woman's, and he saw an ally. Riley's face went ashen. Hackett looked like he was going to be physically sick. "This is a secure area. You can't film here," Riley said weakly. "Actually, your own website states that filming of TSA officers is permitted in public screening areas, provided it doesn't interfere with the screening process." Maria replied smoothly, not intimidated in the slightest. "I was in the public area, and I didn't interfere. I just documented. I have Officer Hackett's comments about profiles, his accusation about looking smart, and his general demeanor. It's about 4 minutes of video. I thought you all might want to know that before this conversation continues. This changed everything. It was no longer a he said, she said situation. There was evidence, irrefutable digital and likely already backed up to the cloud." Damon gave Maria a nod of profound gratitude. "Thank you, Ms. Fuentes. Would you be willing to send me that file? Already planning on it," she said, holding up her phone. "What's your number?" As Damon gave her his number, Riley and Hackett exchanged a panicked look. The situation had escalated from an internal complaint to a potential public relations nightmare. "Now, Dr. Thornton," Riley said, her voice strained. "Let's be reasonable. What can we do to make this right?" The unspoken offer, spoken offer, hung in the air. What will it take to make this go away? Vouchers. A formal, written apology. Damon looked at Elias, who was watching the exchange. His young face a canvas of conflicting emotions. He saw the flicker of vindication in his son's eyes, but also the deep weariness. This was a teachable moment, one that would shape how Elias viewed the world and his place in it. This wasn't about getting a perk or even just getting Hackett fired. It was about something bigger. He pulled out his own phone. "What can you do to make this right?" he repeated softly. "First, you can ensure my son makes his flight, which he is now in danger of missing. An airline representative should be here to escort him to the gate immediately. Second, you are going to give me Officer Hackett's full name and badge number and your full name and title, because this conversation is far from over." He scrolled through his contacts and pressed a name. The phone rang twice before it was answered. "Anya," he said, his voice changing, softening with familiarity, but losing none of its intensity. "It's me. Something happened at the airport. Yes, Elias is okay. He's with me. But I need you. I'm sending you a video. We have a problem, and I think it's a legal one." He disconnected the call and looked at Riley, whose face had crumpled in defeat. The threat of involving a lawyer, his wife no less, was the final nail in the coffin of her hopes for a quiet resolution. "My wife, Dr. Anya Sharma Thornton, is a senior partner at Covington and Burling in D.C., specializing in civil rights litigation," Damon said, letting the information land with the force of a wrecking ball. "She'll be in touch." The drive from BWI to their home in a quiet, leafy suburb of Columbia, Maryland, was silent. Damon had ensured Elias was personally escorted onto the plane by a flustered gate agent, waiting until the jet bridge door closed before turning his back on the airport. Now, sitting in his car, the adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind a heavy, bitter residue. He glanced at the empty passenger seat where Elias had sat just a few hours earlier, his excitement a palpable energy in the car. That energy was gone now, replaced by the ghost of his son's humiliation. When he walked into his house, Anya was waiting in the foyer. She wasn't wearing her usual immaculate lawyer's suit. She'd changed into comfortable clothes, but her posture was rigid, her expression intense. She had a tablet in her hand, the video Maria Fuentes had sent already loaded. "I saw it," she said, her voice tight with a controlled fury that Damon knew well. It was the voice she used when she'd found a fatal flaw in an opponent's argument. "I saw what that man said to our son. He's okay, Anya. I got him on the flight." "Is he?" she countered, stepping forward. "Is he really okay, Damon?" A 12-year-old boy, our boy, publicly shamed and accused of being a criminal because he's bright and curious. That's not something you just shake off. She was right, of course. The wounds weren't physical, but they were deep. Damon sank onto a bench in the hallway, the exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. "I know. When I saw his face, Anya, I wanted to tear that place apart." "I know you did," she said, her voice softening as she sat beside him. "But you did the right thing. You handled it with his dignity, and yours intact." She squeezed his hand. "Now it's my turn." The Thornton Sharma home, usually a place of warm intellectual curiosity, felt different that night. The walls lined with bookshelves, groaning under the weight of everything from classic literature to quantum mechanics. Textbooks seemed to mock the incident. The framed photos of family trips of a younger Elias on his father's shoulders, pointing at a museum rocket, felt like relics from a more innocent time. Anya set up a command center at their dining room table. Her laptop was open. Legal pads were arranged in neat stacks, and her phone was already buzzing with emails and texts from colleagues she'd looped in. She was a force of nature when she was on a case, and her family was the most important case of her life. "Okay," she began all business. "Maria Fuentes has agreed to provide a sworn affidavit. She's also given me permission to use the video. It hasn't been posted publicly yet, which is good. It gives us control over the narrative." Damon paced the room. The NASA jacket still on a piece of armor he couldn't bring himself to remove. What's the plan? Anya. What do we do? We have options, she said, ticking them off on her fingers. Option 1, a formal complaint to the TSA's Internal Affairs and the Department of Homeland Security's Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. It's procedural necessary, but slow, and it often results in a quiet slap on the wrist for the officer a note in his file. Damon scoffed. Not good enough. I agree. Option 2, we go public. We give the video to a major news outlet, the Washington Post, the New York Times. It becomes a national story. The public pressure would be immense. It guarantees a response. But it also puts Elias at the center of a media storm. Damon countered the thought, turning his stomach. His face, his name plastered everywhere. He'd become TSA Kid. I don't want his trauma to become public entertainment. I know Anya said, her eyes meeting his. Which brings us to option 3, the one I favor. A hybrid approach. We initiate the formal complaint quietly and professionally. We draft a demand letter, a work of art that will make their legal department's blood run cold, and we send it directly to the TSA administrator, the head of BWI, and the General Counsel for Homeland Security. In that letter, we mention the existence of the video and affidavits. We don't release it to the press, we use it as leverage. We control the story by keeping it contained, but we make it clear we are willing and able to go nuclear. What do we demand? Damon asked. Everything Anya said, a fierce light in her eyes. This isn't about money. We'll ask for a nominal sum, $1, to establish damages. This is about policy. We demand the immediate termination of Officer Gene Hackett. We demand a formal public apology from the TSA administrator. And we demand a comprehensive top-down review and overhaul of their behavioral profiling and bias training with outside oversight from a civil rights organization. We don't just want one man punished. We want to make it harder for the next Gene Hackett to do this to another child. Meanwhile, in Boston, Elias sat in his aunt's guest room. He'd barely spoken during the car ride from the airport. He had answered his aunt's questions with monosyllables. Now he lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. His backpack was on the floor, seemingly harmless, but it felt tainted. He hadn't touched the Hawking book. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his mom. Mom. Hi, sweetheart. Just checking in. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. We are so proud of you. Then a text from his dad. Dad. The universe is vast and full of wonders, Rocket Man. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for wanting to see them. Your voice matters. Your mind matters. You matter. Tears welled in Elias's eyes, but these were different from the hot, shameful tears at the airport. He pulled his laptop from his bag, opened a blank document, and began to type. He didn't know who he was writing it for, his parents, a diary himself, but the words began to pour out. He wrote about the hum of the lights, the sneer on the officer's face, the weight of 100 staring eyes. He wrote about the feeling of his love for science, being twisted into something ugly and suspicious. As he wrote, something shifted inside him. The shame began to recede, replaced by a nascent, unfamiliar anger. The officer was wrong. The system was wrong. What had happened to him wasn't his fault. It was a story, and it was his story to tell. Back in Maryland, Anya finished typing the initial draft of her letter. Damon looked over her shoulder, reading the precise, powerful legal language that laid bare the injustice of the day. Just then his phone buzzed. It was a notification from a colleague at NASA. Damon, you won't believe this. A video from BWI is starting to pop up on Twitter. Its low quality looks like it was filmed from across the way, but it's going viral. It's about a TSA officer and a kid. Is that... Elias Damon's blood ran cold. He clicked the link. It wasn't Maria's clear close-up video. It was a grainy, distant shot from another passenger, someone who had seen the commotion and filmed it from afar. The audio was muffled, but the image was unmistakable. Officer Hackett leaning over the bin, Damon striding into the frame, the reveal of the NASA jacket. The caption on the tweet read, "Crazy scene at BWI. TSA agent harasses a kid, then his dad rolls up. And he's a NASA scientist." At TSA drama, flying. While black. The hybrid approach was no longer an option. The story was out, and it was about to explode. The grainy video was like a lit match tossed into a canyon of dry tinder. Within hours, the hashtag #TSAdrama evolved into "Much NASA for Dad." By morning, it was the #1 trending topic in the United States. The video copied, shared, and re-uploaded was everywhere. News outlets smelling blood in the water scrambled to identify the people involved. Amateur internet sleuths enhanced the footage, sharpening the image of Damon's ID badge. By 9 a.m., the names Dr. Damon Thornton and Elias Thornton were attached to the story. The narrative was potent and irresistible, a faceless bureaucracy personified by a belligerent officer, bullies a bright black child, only to be confronted by the boy's father, a literal rocket scientist. It was a modern-day David and Goliath story, infused with the volatile dynamics of race authority and intellectualism. For the Thornton-Sharma family, the explosion was a whirlwind. Anya's carefully controlled legal strategy had been blown apart. Her phone and email were now inundated not just with colleagues, but with reporters from every major network and newspaper. Damon's NASA email account was flooded. Their home, once a sanctuary, now felt like the epicenter of an earthquake. "They're parked outside," Damon said, peering through the blinds at a news van with a satellite dish on its roof. "CNN." Anya was on the phone, her voice calm but firm. "No, we are not issuing a statement at this time. No, I cannot confirm any details. Thank you for your interest." She hung up and took a deep breath. That was Reuters. The Associated Press called a minute ago. This is out of our hands now. The public reaction was a tidal wave. The vast majority was overwhelmingly supportive. People were outraged on Elias's behalf. Scientists tweeted their support with the hashtag #SmartIsNotAthreat. Black parents shared their own stories of having to coach their children on how to appear less threatening to authority figures. The NASA logo became a symbol of righteous, intelligent defiance. But there was a darker side. The anonymous trolls of the internet emerged defending Hackett. They called Elias a crisis actor and Damon an arrogant elitist. They flooded the comments sections with racist bile, twisting the narrative into one about a privileged government employee using his status to bully a working-class officer. This duality, the outpouring of support and the venom of hate, was a stark illustration of the divided world they lived in. Meanwhile, for Officer Gene Hackett, the world had collapsed. He was summoned to a meeting early that morning at a sterile TSA administrative office far from the airport. He was met not by Brenda Riley, but by 2 stern-faced officials from headquarters and a lawyer from Homeland Security. The grainy video played on a large monitor in the room. "Is this you, Officer Hackett?" one of the officials asked. "I was following protocol for a suspicious individual." Gene stammered, his voice hoarse. "The protocol for looking smart," the lawyer asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Please point me to that directive in your training manual." He was placed on immediate, indefinite, unpaid administrative leave, pending a full investigation. He was ordered to turn in his badge and credentials. As he walked out of the office, stripped of his uniform and his authority, he felt a bewildering sense of victimhood. They didn't understand. They sat in their fancy offices, making rules while he was on the front lines dealing with the public. He was just trying to do his job. He drove home to his modest townhouse in a state of shock. His wife Cheryl was waiting for him, her face pale. She'd had seen the video. Her cousin had sent it to her. "Jean, what did you do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I did my job." He exploded, the frustration and fear of the morning erupting in a torrent of anger. This kid, he had this look on his face. Arrogant, like he was better than me. Reading his fancy book. My son, our Kevin, can barely get through a comic book, and this kid is reading about black holes. It ain't right. It's not normal. "So you harassed him," Cheryl cried. "You humiliated a child on camera. And his father, a NASA scientist, Jean. Of all the people to pick a fight with." "How was I supposed to know that?" he yelled. "I'm not a mind reader. I'm just trying to keep people safe." His justification, even to his own ears, sounded pathetic. It wasn't about safety. It was about resentment. It was about the simmering anger he felt every day, anger at his dead-end job, his mounting bills, his own perceived failures in life. He saw in Elias Thornton everything he wasn't, everything he felt the world had denied him, and his own son. And in a moment of petty power, he had tried to tear it down. Now it was tearing him down instead. At NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, the situation was being handled with institutional precision. The head of public affairs, a sharp woman named Dr. Aris Thorne, who was also Damon's ultimate superior, called him into her office. "Damon, first and foremost, on a personal level, I am horrified. What happened to your son is unacceptable," she began. "On an institutional level, we have a delicate situation. I understand," Damon said. "I don't want this to reflect poorly on NASA." "On the contrary," Aris said with a small smile. "Unofficially, our public engagement is through the roof. Applications for our educational outreach programs have spiked overnight. Had NASA a dad is the best PR we've had in a decade. It's reinforcing the image of NASA as a place of intelligence, integrity, and frankly, cool-headed courage." She leaned forward. "Officially, the administrator's office has been in touch. They stand behind you completely. They've offered the full support of our legal department, though it sounds like your wife has that well in hand. They want to know what you need." "What I need," Damon said, his resolve hardening, "is for this to mean something. It can't just be a viral moment that fades in a week. Anya is drafting the official demands. It's about changing the system that allowed this to happen." "Good," Aris said. "That's what I hoped you'd say. NASA doesn't back down from a challenge. Let us know how we can help." Back in Boston, Elias was also watching the story explode. His aunt tried to shield him from the worst of it, but it was impossible. His friends were texting him links. His face, even grainy, was everywhere. He read the comments, the good and the bad. The supportive ones made him feel seen. The hateful ones made his stomach clench. That evening he called his parents. "Mom, Dad, we're here, sweetheart." Anya's voice was warm and steady through the speakerphone. "I saw the video," Elias said quietly. "And the comments." Damon's heart ached. Elias, you don't have to read that stuff. It's just noise. I know. But the people who are saying nice things, they get it. Elias said, his own voice finding a new strength. They're sharing their own stories. It's not just me. There was a pause. Mom, Elias said, that letter you're writing to them. I want to add something. Anya and Damon looked at each other. Of course, Elias. What is it? I want to write a statement about what happened. From my point of view, he said. I don't want people just talking about the black kid or the NASA dad's son. My name is Elias Thornton, and I want them to hear my voice. Anya Sharma Thornton's demand letter was a masterclass in legal precision and moral clarity. It was delivered via courier to the TSA administrator, the director of BWI Airport, and the general counsel of the Department of Homeland Security. It did not leak to the press. It was a silent, targeted strike. The letter laid out the events of the incident in excruciating detail, referencing the time-stamped video evidence provided by Maria Fuentes. It systematically dismantled any possible defense preempting claims of standard procedure or random screening. It quoted Officer Hackett's words verbatim. We have a profile for people like you, the ones who try to look smart. But the core of the letter, the part that elevated it from a simple complaint to a profound challenge, came at the end. Attached as Exhibit A was the personal statement from Elias Thornton. Elias had written it himself, his parents editing only for minor grammar. It was not the angry tirade of a victim, but the clear, incisive testimony of a young scientist observing a phenomenon. He wrote, My name is Elias Thornton. I am 12 years old. I love science. When Officer Hackett looked at my book, he didn't see a kid who loves to learn, he saw a threat. He believed that someone who looks like me isn't supposed to understand astrophysics. He wasn't trying to keep the airport safe. He was trying to make me feel small. Being smart shouldn't be suspicious. Being curious shouldn't be a crime. I am not a profile. I am a person. I believe the TSA needs to learn the difference. The effect of that statement, combined with Anya's legal framework and the looming threat of the viral video, was catastrophic for the TSA's internal damage control efforts. They were cornered. A public fight would be a disaster, validating every negative stereotype about the agency. A quiet settlement felt impossible. The Thorntons weren't asking for money they could easily pay. They were asking for accountability and change, which was far more costly. They requested a formal meeting. The meeting was held 2 weeks after the incident in a neutral conference room at a downtown DC law firm. On one side of the polished mahogany table sat Damon Anya and their counsel from her firm. On the other side sat a phalanx of government officials, the TSA's chief counsel, a deputy administrator, Brenda Riley, looking pale and drawn, and their own team of lawyers. Gene Hackett was not present. He had been formally terminated 2 days prior, a sacrificial lamb offered up in the hope it would appease the lions. It did not. We want to begin by offering our most sincere and unreserved apology to you, Dr. Thornton, and especially to your son Elias. The TSA Deputy Administrator began reading from a prepared statement. The actions of former Officer Hackett were inexcusable and do not reflect the values or training of our organization. We can confirm that his employment has been terminated effective immediately. Anya listened patiently until he was finished. We acknowledge the termination of Mr. Hackett, she said, her voice cool and even. It is a necessary first step. It is not, however, a solution. This was not a single bad apple. The tree is the problem. Your supervisor, Ms. Riley, stood by and implicitly condoned his behavior until Dr. Thornton's professional status was revealed. This suggests the problem is cultural, not individual. She slid a thick binder across the table. This is our demand, not a negotiation. A demand. The government lawyer opened the binder. His eyes widened slightly as he read the key points. 1. A formal public apology from the TSA administrator to be read on camera, specifically referencing and quoting from Elias's statement. 2. The establishment of a new mandatory training module for all TSA officers nationwide, focused on mitigating implicit bias, to be developed in consultation with a designated civil rights organization, such as the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. 3. As part of this new protocol, a specific directive to be known internally as the Elias Thornton Directive, explicitly stating that a traveler's choice of reading material, intellectual conversation, or academic-related possessions can never be used as a basis for suspicion or secondary screening. 4. A commitment to track and publicly release anonymized data on secondary screenings, broken down by demographics, to ensure accountability. The TSA Chief Counsel scoffed. This is unprecedented. We can't name a directive after a complainant. We can't cede curriculum development to an outside group. This is an overreach. This was the moment Damon had been waiting for. He leaned forward, speaking for the first time. Overreach. Let me tell you about overreach. Overreach is a grown man in a position of power using his authority to bully a child. Overreach is creating a hostile environment for a citizen based on the color of his skin and the content of his mind. He paused, letting his words sink in. I work for NASA. My entire career is about calculus, trajectory, velocity, stress, tolerances. It's all about predictable outcomes based on initial inputs. You have a cultural problem in your organization, a flawed input. The predictable outcome is what happened to my son, and it will happen again to another child unless you fundamentally change the equation. He then delivered the twist, the final piece of leverage Anya had uncovered in her deep dive. We also know Damon continued, his voice dropping, that this wasn't the first time for Officer Hackett. Our own investigation through a simple Freedom of Information Act request that your agency was slow to fulfill uncovered 2 prior complaints against him for similar behavior. One from a young Muslim woman wearing a university sweatshirt, another from a Latino man carrying architectural blueprints. Both complaints were deemed unsubstantiated by Supervisor Riley. He stared directly at Brenda Riley, whose face turned the color of chalk. You didn't have a bad apple, you had a rotten branch, and you repeatedly failed to prune it. You are as culpable as he is, so you can call our demands an overreach, or you can see them for what they are, the absolute minimum required to begin fixing the systemic failure you have allowed to fester. The choice is yours. Accept our terms, or we walk out of this room, and my wife will file a federal lawsuit this afternoon. We will release every piece of evidence we have. Maria's video. Elias's statement, the prior complaints against Hackett. We will put Ms. Riley on the stand and ask her why she repeatedly ignored a pattern of prejudiced behavior, and we will let a jury and the entire world decide. The room was utterly silent. The government lawyers looked at each other. They had come expecting to negotiate a settlement. They found themselves facing a checkmate. They weren't just fighting the Thornton family. They were fighting the unimpeachable logic of a rocket scientist and the fierce, brilliant strategy of a civil rights attorney armed with a story that had already captured the nation's heart. The TSA Chief Counsel closed the binder and slid it back to the center of the table. He looked at Damon, then at Anya. "Give us 48 hours to review with the administrator," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "But I believe we can find a path forward." The equation had been changed. The 48 hours stretched into a week of tense negotiations. Not over if the TSA would agree, but over the precise wording and implementation of the terms. Anya was relentless, batting away attempts to water down the language or extend the timelines. Damon remained the steadfast moral compass, reminding them at every turn that this was not about punitive damages, but about preventative justice. Finally, they reached an agreement. The TSA administrator, a career civil servant with a somber expression, stood before a podium at a press conference. He read a carefully worded statement acknowledging the unacceptable incident at BWI. He announced the nationwide rollout of a new enhanced bias awareness training program. And then, as Anya had insisted, he looked directly into the camera and said, "We were particularly moved by the words of the young man involved, Elias Thornton, who wrote, 'I am not a profile, I am a person.' He is right, and it is our duty to ensure that every one of our 50,000 officers understands that fundamental truth. We will do better." He didn't use the term Elias Thornton Directive, a concession the TSA's lawyers had fought for and won, claiming it would set a dangerous precedent. Anya had traded the name for a stricter, faster implementation timeline and a more robust oversight committee, which now included a seat for a representative from the civil rights group they designated. It was a strategic victory. The story had reached its public conclusion. The news cycle moved on. The hashtag NASA Tordad faded from the trending topics, but for the Thornton family, the resolution was quieter and more profound. Elias returned from his aunt's house, not broken, but changed. The incident had forced him out of his quiet observational shell. He had found his voice first in his written statement, and now in person. He gave a presentation at his school's science club, not just about black holes, but about the importance of curiosity and of standing up to prejudice even when it was frightening. His classmates, who had all seen the news, listened with a new respect. He was no longer just the quiet, smart kid. He was Elias, the boy who had spoken truth to power and won. Damon and Anya watched his transformation with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Pride in the resilient young man he was becoming, and sorrow that he had been forced to grow up so quickly. The incident had left a permanent mark, but they had ensured it was a scar, not an open wound. One clear, cold night a month later, Damon set up his powerful amateur telescope in the backyard. It was a clear night, and the Andromeda Galaxy was a faint, hazy smudge in the eyepiece. "Come take a look, Rocket Man," he called to Elias, who was sitting on the back step. Elias came over and peered into the telescope. "Wow," he whispered, captivated by the sight of 1 trillion stars, 2.5 million light-years away. "You know," Damon said, standing beside him, his hand on his son's shoulder, "when you look at something that big, that old, it puts things in perspective." "Yeah," Elias said, still looking. "Officer Hackett seems pretty small right now." "He is small," Damon agreed. "The universe is governed by immense, powerful, beautiful laws. Gravity, electromagnetism, the laws of thermodynamics. They are consistent, and they apply to everyone and everything, no matter who they are or what they look like." He looked up at the glittering swath of the Milky Way. "People, we're more complicated. We make up our own petty rules. We let fear and ignorance create interference. Sometimes the hardest job isn't calculating the trajectory to Mars. It's correcting the course of one person's heart, or one institution's culture. Elias looked up from the eyepiece, his eyes reflecting the starlight. The fear that had haunted them was gone, replaced by the familiar, brilliant curiosity his father so loved. "But it can be done right," Elias asked. "You can correct the course." Damon squeezed his son's shoulder, a full, genuine smile spreading across his face for what felt like the first time in a month. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, you can. You just need the right thrust, the right trajectory. And you can't be afraid to make a little noise on liftoff." Together, father and son stood under the vast, silent, and impartial sky, two brilliant minds bound by love, resilience, and an unshakable faith in the power of seeing things and people for what they truly are. The journey had been harrowing, but it had brought them here to a place of deeper understanding, their family bond stronger than any force on earth. The story of Elias and Dr. Thornton isn't just a viral moment. It's a powerful reminder that one family's courage can challenge a system. It shows that standing up for what's right with intelligence and dignity can create ripples of change that extend far beyond a single incident. We've all seen injustice, big and small. The question is, what do we do when we see it? Do we look away, or do we become an ally like Maria Fuentes? Do we stand up and speak like Dr. Thornton? If this story of integrity, family strength, and the fight for justice moved you, please give this video a like to help it reach more people. Share it with someone who needs to hear a story of hope and courage. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that explore the challenges and triumphs that connect us all. What would you have done in their shoes? Let us know in the comments below.